Soon the fragments and the ripples all regather, and again the moon in its last crescent in pure stillness lies upon the water. Michael Hartnett. So in the spring of 2016, myself and Colum McCann, who you can hear in the background, I wish he was here physically, but he's here on my stereo, came to Newcastle West, and we read and played music together, and it was an extraordinary evening, and I was so delighted to be a part of what you do there in Newcastle West and Limerick, and it was one of the best literary nights ever. Here I am joining you from New York. My name is Colum McCann. A couple of years later, and nonetheless enthusiastic for everything that it is that you do. I will turn down Colum's music right now, sadly. There's a great line from the poet Jim Harrison, who says, after the passing of irresistible music, we must get used to the dripping of the faucet. So here I am, the dripping of the faucet. It is an honor to be with you, as I said, and it's been 4 years, and there's always been something in Limerick for me that aligns itself with stories and storytellers, whether it be Kate O'Brien or, of course, Frank McCourt tilting against the rain, and the small-minded ones fumbling in the till and adding the halfpence to the pence, and of course there's Etna Strong, and then there's Marion Keyes and Donald Ryan and Kevin Barry and all of these younger writers coming up now too. Of course, Michael D. But for me, one of the fundamental linchpins was always Michael Hartnett, and so Limerick always seemed to me to be a city that wanted story and music, had a desire for it, like a taste like salt in its mouth. And the city's different to others, I think, in that respect. Dublin, where I come from, mea culpa, I'm sorry. Cork, Belfast, Galway seem to want to be talked about, but Limerick has always seemed to me to be a county and a city that wants to be listened to. So Limerick actually became a natural place in which to set up a storytelling centre, Narrative 4, of which Vicky Nash is an extraordinary part of our board and our leaders. But we bring young people together from all over the country together to tell stories, and then to turn that newfound empathy into action on the ground. We are there in 58 O'Connell Street. It was set up actually later that year, finally opened later that year in 2016 to great fanfare. The idea behind Narrative 4 being you tell my story, I tell yours, and this act of radical empathy being designed so that the true function of stories really to connect us and bring us alive in bodies or spirits not our own, or even places not our own, can flourish. And this flourish happens most spectacularly when we listen to the stories of others. And if we listen to others, we can have as many lives as we want. And what is the world except the story of everyone else? Which leads me to my book, A Paragon, which I'm going to read to you from today. Another quick story about Colum McCann. We went back there in 2019, and Colum brought his fiddle, and we toured around the West Bank, and more than a couple of times we thought, this place aligns itself quite well with Limerick. I mean, when we were in the cafes of Ramallah, and in Beit Jala and Beit Sahur, and you meet these sort of spectacular young people. The currency, the imaginative currency that was there in Palestine was an extraordinary thing for us to recognize, and it was a beautiful thing to be part and parcel of an ongoing trust of things. And Colum would take out his fiddle, and people would gather around, and that music became the currency of who and what we wanted to be. So I do think Limerick is very close to me personally, but also close to where Bassam Aramin, one of the heroes of my novel, and also indeed Rami Elhanan, another of the heroes of my novel, so often gather. They gather in Beit Jala, and that's how I got into this novel. I traveled with a group from Narrative 4 to Israel and Palestine. And on the second to last night of the first trip in 2015, I walked into the small little rickety offices in Beit Jala and sat down at the table with these two men, Rami and Bassam. And within half an hour, my heart was blown wide open, extraordinarily changed by listening to the stories of how they had lost their daughters and how they want to turn that grief into action on the ground. I hope I'm still recording. I'm just looking here because yes, I think I'm still recording. I'm so sorry. I wanted to turn that grief into action, or they want to turn that grief into understanding rather, So I got to know them over the course of the next 4 years, and I traveled back and forth to Israel and Palestine numerous times. I traveled with Rami on his motorbike. I traveled with Bassam in his car. I walked through checkpoints. I went on grand walks in the wilderness. I met with writers, with artists, musicians of all shapes and stripes, and tried to write this novel. Which is really about a friendship between two men, but more than that, it's about how we can reach across the divides to people who are supposedly different to us, people who are supposedly our enemies. And my first little reading is from the very center of the book, which where I sort of lay down the ground rules of what the book is about. It's set in 1001 cantos, and this is the middle canto, which is 1001 in itself. Obviously a reference to the Arabian Nights, 1001 Nights, in the sense that Rami and Bassam tell the stories of their daughters, and in doing so they become a sort of Scheherazade, telling the stories to keep their daughters alive, and if you will, as Michael Hartner would have had it, to root up the truffles of the mind and always bring it back to the stories of their daughters. 1001. Once upon a time, and not so long ago and not so far away, Rami Elhanan, an Israeli, a Jew, a graphic artist, husband of Nurit, father of Elik and Guy and Yigal, father too of the late Smadar, travelled on his motorbike from the suburbs of Jerusalem to the Kremazin monastery in the mainly Christian town of Beit Jala near Bethlehem, in the Judean hills, to meet with Bassam Aramin, a Palestinian, a Muslim, a former prisoner, an activist, born near Al-Khalil or Hebron, husband of Salwa, father of Arab and Areen and Muhammad and Ahmed and Hiba, father too of the late Abir, 10 years old, shot dead by an unnamed Israeli border guard in East Jerusalem, almost a decade after Rami's daughter, Smadar, 2 weeks away from 14, was killed in the western part of the city by 3 Palestinian suicide bombers, Bashar Sawala, Youssef Shuli, and Tawfiq Yassin, from the village of Asariya al-Shamaliya near Nablus in the West Bank, a place of intrigue to the listeners gathered in the red brick monastery, perched on the hillside in the mountains of the beloved, by the terraced vineyard, in the shadow of the wall, having come from a far part as Belfast and Kyushu, Paris and North Carolina, Santiago and Brooklyn, Copenhagen and Terezin, on an ordinary day, at the end of October, foggy, tinged with cold, to listen to the stories of Bassam and Rami, and to find within their stories another story, a song of songs, discovering themselves, you and me. In the stone-tiled chapel where we sit for hours, eager, hopeless, buoyed, confused, cynical, complicit, silent, our memories imploding, our synapses skipping in the gathering dark, remembering, while listening, all of those stories that are yet to be told. And so this is very much a book about stories and storytelling. It's a book about these two men who travel literally around the world, and they've been to Ireland. And hopefully we'll get them in Limerick sometime soon, when all this COVID has gone away. And we are able to return to some form of normal. And they're great friends of mine. And I think, they've done extraordinary things. Sorry for the frog in my throat. They've done extraordinary things by going around the world, and I wanted to read just a couple more short sections. And this is a section, section 273 from the first part of the book, and it concerns Bassam. State your name. Bassam Aramin, from Hebron. Age 42. Who are you traveling with? My wife and children. Destination? England. Where in England? Bradford. Never heard of it. It's a university. What's your purpose? To go to university. Are you trying to be smart with me? No. Where did you get this permit? I explained that to the other officers. Do I look like the other officers? From the office in Jerusalem. What's your purpose in going to university? To study. Are you a professor? No. How old are you? 42, I told you. And you're studying? Yes. Where did you go to school? The village in Sair. Where's that? Near Hebron. Did you finish school? My studies were interrupted. What does that mean, interrupted? I didn't finish school, no. Why are you smiling? I always smile. It's part of what I do. I like to smile. Do you want to miss another plane, Bassam? No. Then wipe that grin off your face and tell me, where did you learn Hebrew? After school. After school, is that so? Yes. I have your file here. I know who you are. Then why did you ask? Don't be a smart arse. Answer the question. After school, I learned it after school. Then I worked for the authority, first in sports, then in archives. Then I was accepted into the program at Bradford. I have a special permit. I have the right to go there. Answer my question. Why are you going to university now? I was offered a place. You do like that smile of yours, don't you? Not especially. State your name again. Why? I said, state your name again. Do you hear me? Are you listening? Bassam Aramin. 25 years without studying, and all of a sudden, Bassam Aramin, you're an intellectual? I never said that. I'm going as a student. You're going for how long? A year. The permit is for 2 years. Yes. And you're going to study what? The Shoah. Pardon me? The Holocaust. I heard you. You're studying the Shoah. You're an Arab. You're a Muslim. You're a terrorist. 7 years in prison. You attack us. You throw grenades. You terrorize us. And now you're studying the Shoah. You say you're an intellectual. Is this some sort of joke, Bassam? What do you think I am, stupid? I don't think you're stupid at all. Is that what you're telling me, Bassam, that you're going to England so you can tell us how the Shoah didn't happen? No. What do you mean, no? One of the things I have learned is that nobody wants to be expelled from history. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm not interested in denying the truth. Is that so? I don't believe in violence of any sort. Since when? Since a long time ago. Really? Yes. How many terrorists are you going to be meeting in Bradford, Bassam? I don't know. What's a terrorist? Can you define it for me? You're asking me? My wife is waiting. My children are waiting. We're going to miss another plane. And I have to say that I'm a little terrified right now, yes. Oh, you're a real smart arse, Bassam, aren't you? I don't think so. Don't smile. I'm not smiling. I'm not laughing. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here answering your questions, waiting for my plane. State your name. I gave it 12 times already. Name. Bassam Aramin. Is that your child crying? I can't see through walls. Why is she crying, Bassam? I don't know, probably because she's tired. We've been here a long time. Can't your wife shut her up? My wife is tired too. We've been here for 8 hours. I don't know how many flights we've missed. How many children do you have, Bassam? 5. I used to have 6. Bassam then goes to Bradford, goes to university, and he studies. And I'm just going to read you a little bit from section 277. In the library, he read Primo Levi, Adorno, Susan Sontag, Edward Said. He watched Schindler's List, searched out other films, documentaries, combed through reams of news footage. He dug out pictures of the camps, found everything he could about Theresienstadt. He read too about the effects of trauma and its intersection with memory, Adler, Janet, Freud. The acquisition of fear, the disintegration of memory over time, the task of language. At times it seemed to him that his brain had caught fire. He would come home to Salwa late at night, exhausted, thrilled. He would fall asleep on the sofa, books open on the chest, feet propped up on the coffee table. He began work on his master's thesis, The Holocaust, the use and abuse of history and memory. He wrote it in longhand. He thought in Arabic, but he wrote in English. He was aware that these were not new ideas, just new to him. Still, it felt as if he were in the territory of the explorer. He'd cast himself out to sea. Most of the time he ended up crashing back on the shore, but every now and then he chanced upon a small rumour of land. Still, when he tried to find purchase, the land disappeared before his eyes. This was the true terror, he thought. His was a responsibility not to diminish. He wanted to talk about the use of the past in the justification of the present, about the helix of history, one moment bound to the next, about where the past intersects with the future. He was the oldest in his class, peace studies. He sat in the second to last row of seats to the side of the room, kept as quiet as possible, hardly ever spoke above a whisper. He seldom volunteered, but if he did, it was slow-spoken, soft, considered. He left class with his head bowed, smoked alone, away from the buildings, kept his prayer mat out of view. Still, the word leaked out. He was a Palestinian, an activist. He had lost his 10-year-old daughter. He was studying the Holocaust. He knew the names of the caretakers, the groundsmen, the canteen ladies. They nodded to him as he went along. They were open and jovial. They wanted to know what football team he supported. He wasn't interested in the game, but he began to wear a Bradford scarf. They loved the way he pronounced the town, his thick Arabic English. Bradford. They nicknamed him Kaiser Soze for his limp. They told him he looked like Kevin Spacey, an Arab version. He had no idea what they were talking about. So he rented the film and he watched it with Salwa. They laughed about the idea of him being one of the usual suspects. The life of a Palestinian. The small ironies. And so that's a little bit from a paragon. And a paragon, of course, is a paragon is a shape with a countably infinite number of sides. Crazy title, I know. My publishers, you should have seen their faces when I first told them that that's what I was going to call it. And you're going to write about Israel and Palestine too. But I stuck with it, and I hope the word sticks in your mind, because we're all there. We're all part of the shape. We're all complicit. We're all part of the story of Bir and Smadar. We're also part of the story of Rami and Bassam. In so many ways we're connected. In particular, I do think that being Irish, we're even more deeply connected, because we know about conflict, we know about language, we know about lies and half lies and the misuse of history. We also know what it means to be colonized, and we know what it means to have to look at that grief and live with that grief for generations. The book, I hope, sort of brings a light to these things. It doesn't try to answer any questions. It's not didactic. I don't think writers should be didactic. I think the best writing does not tell you what to think, but allows you to think. It's much more interesting to be allowed to think than to be told what it is that you should know.